I was trying to go live with my new Mac, but I had the wrong browser. You know how picky they are. They want to make sure that they've got every single thing I'm doing. And so I fought that for so long. When I first started this research, I got into some black sites and got cut off. And that gave me a little scare. Fortunately, I started referring to the old books instead of the internet. And because I went into a different category of research and really helpful. However, I know now that, once you're in the cloud, they've got you and all that, but I can't worry about it. It's too much. I was trying to fix my phone to just, make that as private as possible. I got the settings wrong and all that. So I don't want to say I'm a person with ADHD because everybody has that today. But I'm 72 and I've struggled with those symptoms all my life, which have been both very powerful and positive and very challenging and painful at the same time. So just a warning that I hyper focus really easily. And when I'm not hyper focused, I'm everywhere. That is both the reason that I found a lot of this, and it's also the reason that it's taken me so long to get it to you. A number of reasons. First, I wanted to be sure, of course. I spent 33 years telling people about a Jesus that never existed. And that makes me sick at my heart. And I thought for sure that what I was sharing was valid, and I thought it worked. Although, I've got to tell you, from the beginning, things didn't reconcile. I just bought it, and I'll tell you exactly why. I knew there was some spiritual thing in me from the minute I was born. Maybe you did too. And then we wonder where to put it, what to do with it. What category does that go in? It's not an organ. How do you treat it? You know that sometimes it's really powerful and sometimes it's non existent. And so I've learned a lot more about the aura and that it actually is its own thing. It's something we should have been learning about and understanding from the beginning. But at that time, in 1981, my husband, who died, was having a hard time with alcohol, and it was really a struggle, and I needed help. I had a son that was, I guess, between 11 and 15, and I needed to provide him with some foundation. And the only foundation I had in my life, I'd eked out on my own, and it certainly wasn't conventional. So what did I do? I put him in the local little Baptist church where they would teach him all the things that the world told me were right and good and correct. Problem was, it wasn't. What a story. When I do something, I give my all to it. So the little Baptist church got me saved, and I said all the words and all that and ministered to all the youth, about drugs, because I'd come from that and I'm a survivor. So I did that. And then I knew there was more, right? And you're studying the word and remembering these scriptures, and the whole time, so many times I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. But you think, I just don't know enough, right? I'm a sheep. I'm an unworthy sheep. What do I know? Because they drill that into you. and all that sin consciousness, particularly from the Baptist church, right? I didn't last long there. However, so then I met my favorite person in the world, my best friend Marion, and she turned me on to the non-denominational church of the 80s. It was the name it and claim it. And they acknowledged this mysterious spirit I had and this intuition I had and allowed it. And so I gave my all. And I studied the Bible. I've got 15 Bibles, not to even start mentioning the concordances, the dictionaries, etc. Well, there are several here because I still use the dictionaries. However, I dug in. Well, I always had questions. Why would God choose one over another? That's not a good parent. And what kind of parent does that, right? And then some of the stories just didn't add up to me. Now, I only had a high school education. I had never taken anything but American history, basically, and had all these fairy tale images in my mind about that. And so I didn't have a lot to base my new information on. I didn't have a historical basis or a spiritual basis from, documented ancient stories of where we came from. I just accepted that the Bible was the beginning. Ha! What a joke. It only says the world is 6,000 years old, that humanity is 6,000 years old. Well, the minute you study anything practical, you start to go, and all of it. So I'm going to skip a lot right now. Eventually, I figured out that Jesus was fake. How? Because everything doesn't want you to believe that. I'll tell you exactly how. I was in Bible school. This was after that famous day in January where I first decided that I needed to start investigating, right? That day changed my entire world. And at that time, I made up my mind that every question I'd ever had, I would look into and I would figure it out no matter how deep I had to dig or how long it would take me. And I started researching. I first found out all the lies about this place. It's all fairy tale. It's all made up. It's all made up to get you to do what they need for you to do so they can keep everything wrapped. That's it. So is my new crutch word. I'll get better. So when I started looking things up, I was helping with Vacation Bible School for the young kids. And a teenager came in and said, "Do you know how we know about Jesus?" "No, how?" "Josephus." I'd heard the name, but I didn't know much about Josephus, so a red flag went up. Study Josephus. So I did. And guess what I found out? Ha! First thing I did was start looking up the history of his character. And you find out, I'm not going to read this, I'm just going to tell you, I'll share a Reader's Digest. You find out that this Josephus character was a Jew, right? and he was leading a group of Jews, and the Romans were after them. And Josephus says, hey, you guys, look, it'd be much better if if the Romans, we don't want them to get us, they'll pull us apart. Let's just kill ourselves and then we'll die proudly. So he said, we'll draw straws. Well, of course, Josephus got the last straw, right? And so he was the last one. Well, all his cronies killed themselves, and then he hightailed it and hid in a cave. He didn't want to come out because he thought the Romans were after him, and so were the Jews. Well, the Jews, his little group, were dead, and the Romans thought he was a hero. So somebody told him, come into town, you're a hero. So he goes into Rome, and they make him head historian. How about that? And Josephus is the guy that you and I count on for everything we know about biblical history and a lot of other history, and he was fake. So when I heard that story, something didn't jive. I just went, there is no frickin' way that some Jew is gonna do that and then be historian. It ain't happening. And so I didn't believe it. So one thing led to another, and I started looking him up. And that was some deep, deep digging. He's the guy that everybody refers to when they talk about biblical history or a lot of other history. And he was a part of the family that the Piso family, Arius, Calpurnius, Piso, they were all interrelated. Arius and his people, and I'm going to give you some names in a minute, but let's see, Nero, Caesar's, Cleopatra, all those guys were related. And so they had this hierarchy, this inside group that could do anything. And they're the ones who could read and write. They're the ones who had access to the libraries. No one else did. And so they created this story. Now, it wasn't hard because at that time, no, like I said, most people were illiterate, and there were so many different sects of what you might say Christianity. The word Christ is really means anointed or blessed. And so there were lots of different sects of Christians and Jews here and there. And, you know, the people in charge wanted to unite them so that they'd be easier to manage. When I started looking, then I found errors in the genealogy. I found that that the people who provided our education manipulated it so that we would believe what we believe based on the Bible. It was a well laid out plan a long time ago. So when I started looking at all this, and I know I'm flopping around a lot because I've got so much info. This right here are my notes on how the Bible is a hoax. And everything is documented, and I print it because I don't want to count on the internet. So I kept looking, and I found Randall Carlson, started studying sacred geometry, and then I was lucky enough to find Doug Vogt online. He died 2 years ago, and sickening story, but he figured out the Hebrew lettering system. And when he did that, when I found that, it all started to make sense. When I first started looking for the Bible code or for the secrets or to unravel this, when I first started looking, I thought it was Hebrew. And then I thought, okay, looked into Hebrew and then Paleo Hebrew. Okay, well then, no, go back farther to the Sumerians. And when you find the Sumerians, they wrote in cuneiform, which is like little web, like wedge-shaped things in stone. And then you find out, okay, the Sumerians were far advanced than we are. And why were they writing in mud then? Right? So many questions, so many things don't make sense. So you dig deeper and you dig deeper. Well, I had a couple problems with Doug's work, even though he is a hero to me. He's absolutely top of my pick. But I had a problem because he was a Jew. And Jews are faithful to their faith, even though he admitted that he was flat when he figured it out. And he admitted and wrote about, he was one of the first people to write about the multiverse. He wrote about that back in the 70s. And so he had figured this stuff out. Here's one of his books that you can tell I've read a number of times. So he figured it out. How? He took 3 excursions to Sinai and was trying to figure out where everything was, where Moses gave the tablets or got the tablets, etc. And he found out a number of things. When he got there, he knew that he had to figure out, why are these tablets? Why are they written on both sides? What is the code in this information that he has from the Torah, and trying to restructure everything because he was raised as a Jew who was well taught in the Torah and all that. So he couldn't figure it out until he and his partner got together and said, what if we've been looking at everything all wrong? What if this is not what we think? What if it's an information system? The minute they started seeing our universe or multiverse as an information system, everything clicked together. Then they could figure out the quantum and the gravity and all that made sense when you think about information. And that's what we are, is information. We're an information system. And my info is a little different than your info, right? So when he figured this out, he re-looked at the scriptures and started taking them apart and figured out that what was given to us were vectors of information. And so the 22 letters of the Torah that were the original were actually toroidals of energy. It's a computer system. I know that sounds complicated, but I did data processing in the late 60s. And when we did, we had these gigantic machines. And you would enter information, punch holes in a card, and the holes in the card would go in the big machine, and the big machine would know what to do. So I got that. So it made sense to me that on these tablets, there would be information that would move the machine, right? So then I'd never had any physics background, and I knew business math well, but not, this kind of math. So I had to learn so much. And he helped me. And each of the letters then each of the original Hebrew letters is a toroid of information. And I've got some pictures here that will help it make sense to you. Sure, which one? Let me just, I've got a little toroidal up here. Here's one. So a toroidal is like a donut of energy. And so every letter is tweaked to get a different sound. And when the toroid, which is an atom with energy in it, and kind of, not a vacuum, but you know, it creates sound. It creates energy and that, and each of those are different depending on the letter. And they have the XYZ axis in there that tells you which letter it is. When he figured this out, everything started coming together. Okay. Then he was able to go back and figure out the codes used in Genesis and in the Bible. Incredible things came out of that new paradigm. It's always a paradigm shift. Always. That is always what holds us up. Uncle Arthur, my favorite evangelist, said that trouble is never in trouble. It's in our attitude towards trouble, right? And that's why we haven't figured out what they did. We've looked at it all wrong. Well, I'm going to stop there because it's 22 minutes, and that's about as much as most people can take. Sorry it's taking so long to dig into this, but I'm trying to lay a foundation. And as I said, the information is just, I'm overwhelmed with all the info from every direction because I've been doing this for 7 years, and I should have been sharing it as I went along, but I didn't because I didn't have the confidence and I didn't want to share more bullshit with people. I think we've had enough of that. Thanks for joining me if you did, and I'll work at getting better. I hope you got something from this, and if you did, please give a like. That's what the YouTubers say.